one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Belzer is absent this evening with notice, so I don't know about any correspondence that she was aware of. So move on to comments from the public. If there were any, this would be the time. Okay, I don't see any. Student representative report, I don't see our student here. So we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Cody. Governor Rick Snyder has proclaimed February 13th through 17th, 2012 as Michigan Principals Week, and school principals richly deserve recognition for their commitment to our students, not just this week, but all year long. So we have one principal here this evening, and he's representing the group. And so please pass along to your colleagues how much we appreciate. Yeah, we'll see them all tomorrow, so thank you. And then we have 3 staff retirements. Deb Woodworth, Wilkshire Library Coordinator, has served the district for 24 years, will retire in June. Karen McCardle, former Meridian High School and English Social Studies teacher, has retired. That's effective March 31st. And Sam Bird, former Meridian High School math teacher and presently a math teacher at Hazlitt High School, who has served the district for the last 12 and a half years. His effective date is June 30th, 2012. And we wish them best wishes in their future endeavors. I have an out-of-state field trip request that we will have as an action item at our next board meeting, and this is from Principal Andy Pridgeon at the middle school, requesting to take the 8th graders to Cedar Point this spring on May 18th, 2012. And as I said to you, this request will be an action item at the February 27th board meeting. And then lastly, I got an email from Janet Buchholz today, who's with us, and she wanted the board to know that the robotics team won the Granville tournament this past Saturday, and the win qualifies them for the national competition in Nebraska. Is that correct?
Terrific.
Wow.
Do you want to add anything to that, Janet?
How cool is that?
Yeah, and hopefully they'll qualify for Worlds again too.
Qualify for the world.
Got another chance, so.
Okay, so hopefully maybe this spring we can get them back in here.
Yeah, that was fun to have them before.
New robot.
Yeah.
Yes,
Very cool.
that's
Very
great.
cool.
Congratulations.
And that concludes my report.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. We'll move on to discussion items. We had originally had a discussion item tonight regarding all-state band, but our band director, Mr. Gott, had a conflict come up, so we will move that discussion item to our next meeting on February 27th. So now we get to move straight into our respect and responsibility in the English curriculum at the high school. We have Stephanie Livingston and Sue Donison here to tell us about it. We've got it.
Swivel a little bit that way. So we appreciate the opportunity to come today and talk to you a little bit about the district goals of respect and responsibility in terms of kind of bullying and harassment, and as we touch upon those topics at the high school in our language arts curriculum. So what we have for you today is a brief presentation about how we touch upon each of these through our literature in grades 9 through 12.
In the 9th grade, the students read a book called Speak, where they investigate how one girl overcomes bullying and ostracism to tell her own story. And it's very contemporary. The students seem to enjoy it a lot. And A Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls to explore how one can triumph over challenging life circumstances in order to achieve lifelong success. And both of these stories, I think, really help students talk about their own lives in ways that can be very enriching for them.
As well as coping strategies, ways to deal with that bullying and ostracism. Both of these pieces have to deal with young people. The characters are young people. Speak is a 9th grade girl, so that very much connects to their experience. At the 10th grade level, in the English 10 course, We Teach of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, and we talk quite a bit about overcoming prejudice towards those with disabilities and the tough choices one must make in order to survive prejudice, specifically relating to a character with some disabilities. And in English 10H, the honors level English course, classics, Scarlet Letter, and To Kill a Mockingbird, both dealing with ostracism from a community and how a person overcomes that, and the dehumanizing treatment that a person can overcome if they're considered an outsider from that community. In the 11th grade, in the English 11 course, Lord of the Flies, we talk quite a bit about the dehumanizing treatment of one group of boys towards another, and the physical size difference and how that plays into bullying and harassment and is used as a mechanism to intimidate. Again, talking about coping mechanisms, ways in which kind of the group dynamic can change and alter with particular leaders in a group, and how to deal with that. And then we've added a new book to our curriculum for English 11 this year, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. Very contemporary piece of literature, won the National Book Award in 2007. And that talks quite a bit about the main character, who is a 9th grader. Again, so this connects to our student's experience as he experiences bullying and harassment in his community, and then as he transfers to a new school, as he tries to learn about some new opportunities outside of his community and how he deals with that.
And in 12th grade, the world literature, there's a thematic unit called Bearing Witness and, I should say actually, walking towards change, is to recognize the importance of personal responsibility and promoting respect and morality across diverse cultures. And in the unit, in fact, we just finished the unit last week, we read a story by Isabel Allende, which talked about Chile and disappear, and Amnesty and Nadine Gordimer, so we talked a lot about apartheid, and we read also some pieces about Nelson Mandela. Vigil is a poem really paying tribute to Chinua Achebe, who writes about Nigeria and Biafra and Dead Man's Path and Southern Peace. And then The World Was Silent is a nice follow-up by Elie Wiesel, to the book that they have actually read in ninth grade, so that's a nice reconnection for them.
So in all levels, we're touching upon these ideas of respect and responsibility as it relates to us as one human being community.
Any questions?
I don't know if I noticed in 11 honors or AP English or any works mentioned.
Nothing that speaks specifically to it, in the sense that I did speak with those instructors. Our AP English teacher has a variety of things that do touch on it in its own way, Antigone, for example, being one, but it's not so much from a bullying and harassment perspective. English 11H, not as much, much harder. We're talking Pride and Prejudice, so, it's a little bit of a stretch there, yeah.
I am curious, when you add a book like the True Story of the Part-Time Indian, do you substitute that for another book that then you're taking out, or is it just added?
That particular one was substituting for a different book that we found a bit of a challenge with our English 11 students. We used to teach Dracula, which is a fantastic story, but we found took up a lot of our curricular time. It is a very long book, and so you make trade-offs about the amount of time that instructional time you spend with a text and the amount of sort of payoff you get for doing so. So we made that exchange. As well, with the English 11 student population, something that was more contemporary and related to their experience with a character of their age made a bit more sense for that group.
As you get into discussion with the various books that they're reading, do you find that sometimes the discussion does focus in on areas involving everyday issues that some of them may experience, as far as bullying, respect and responsibility? And
I know that, for instance, in this one, the whole concept of bearing witness is, what do you do when you witness something happening to somebody else, and do you step up? And I think that that's a very important piece for students to think about before they leave high school. So yes,
so it does.
absolutely.
It does get into that discussion. That's good.
As
So actually, I just want to see if I understand. This isn't the totality of what they would, I was going to say, I have a sophomore and a junior, so I kind of know
That's
some of those.
2 weeks for English 12. That's a 2-week unit.
Okay, but I mean, as you walked all the way through, the ninth grade, that's not all. You just picked out the things that had to do with
These-
respect and responsibility.
Yes.
Good. I just wanted to see if
This
that.
is just a little sliver.
Yeah, yeah.
Each grade.
And actually, that's been in the curriculum for a while. That's not a new, that hasn't risen to the top. We haven't changed the curriculum because you've focused on respect and responsibility.
These have been things that we've talked about for many years.
Yeah.
English 12 is a class that, this is only the 4th year that it's taught, so I guess that would be the newest of them, but
Right, and in the English 11, we added the new text this year.
Yeah.
But in terms of ninth grade, speak, those sorts of 10th grade with the Scarlet Letter and To Kill a Mockingbird, those are classics that have been part of our.
Glass Castle's been on there for a while.
Yep.
yeah.
We really wanted to spend just a short amount of time talking about how we've integrated,
Yeah.
and that respect and responsibility is a part of the curriculum. It's not an add-on, or it's not something we're doing necessarily because of the new bullying law, but that these are themes that we have been touching on for a few years, and we personally feel that integrating that into what's happening in the classroom makes a lot more sense than doing standalone curriculum.
I'm so impressed by that because I think that's so true. And we've been doing it for a long time. There's just so much attention to bullying these days, as if we've just woken up and realized it's a bad thing. And I mean, I really feel like we've been addressing it for such a long time. Not that the new attention is a bad thing. It's just that I actually think some of our legislators are acting as though if they hadn't passed this law, nobody would do anything about bullying, and it's just not the case.
And I believe what we're trying to share with the board through the PBIS presentations, as well as the responsive classroom, the other things that happen every day in our classrooms, K-12, is that we are focusing on those issues and have been for a while.
Well, what I think is also very important is that as they read the books, as they focus on the issues, that then there's an open dialogue that is occurring with the kids, because I think the more openness and conversation surrounding this issue, the better it is.
Well, probably it's very safe, much safer to have a conversation about a book character than ask
Absolutely.
questions.
Yeah.
And it also, reflects too that you can have these values that you want to have a responsibility to impart upon our students, but they have to look very different at every stage. And maybe there's something you can sit down with kindergartners about or third graders about, but if you sat down with high schoolers and said, today, you lose it. But yet here they are, and it's not, as you said, it's in there, so it's not like they're talking to their sibling that sibling didn't read that book too 7 years ago.
Do you find that we're able to take, because some of these books are pretty old, things that I studied when I was in school. It doesn't mean they're not still really good, but that we're able to bring that to life for today and bring in like the the social media component and so forth a little bit in our discussions about the subject matter.
I think so, because I think, we do talk about social media with the kids, and we're very concerned about the use of it, and so that might not be something that really is suggested in the literature per se, but we can extend the conversation to how that might also occur, in some instances. And
Like-
certainly, I know in teaching about this, some of the senior students are very interested in, politics and what's going on around the world, and some of the, the potential democracies in other parts of the world and stuff, and so they've talked about that a little bit more, and of course we encourage them to talk with social studies teachers. So I think it's also a nice way to kind of integrate what's going on with other subject areas. So yeah, I think we're able to do that. We try.
Great.
Also integrating some of the current events regarding bullying. The students are well aware it's part of the national discussion as well. And so my students, for example, just did a research project where they looked at bullying in the last 24 months in the United States. They had to research an article and then bring a discussion point to the class to talk about. So we did, one of them was about Facebook and does it make us meaner? And another one was about bullying laws. And so we're able to make that contemporary current event connection as well.
Good.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Very good.
Thank you, Sue.
Get you around here. Take you right around. I had it last time too.
Oh, okay, we will move to board reports. Policy and Personnel Committee, Kristen is not here, but
But we have not met.
Okay.
We have a meeting scheduled.
coming up, yes. Finance and Facilities,
Also have not met, have a meeting coming up next Thursday.
yes. And items from other board members. Tobias?
Mr. Cook, could you give us a preliminary overview?
You beat us to that, was exactly what the rest of us were sitting here wanted to ask too.
Well, I can try my best, but unfortunately, a lot of the details have not been released. Basically, my understanding is that there's roughly $198 million that's been interjected into one-time monies. Last year, we got one-time monies. If you remember, we got $200, $100 for best practices, and $100 for retirement credit. This year, I believe that they've developed those, the best practices and best incentives to two separate buckets. The first bucket being more educationally, where there's going to be goals that you have to meet based on scores. I believe that's in math and reading, 3 to 8, correct? And then there's something at the secondary. Sharon, help me
Talking
out.
about the MME.
MME.
Yes.
So those three areas will be based on improvement and some other types of measures to see that you're making progress or doing something from the year in the past. And so my understanding is that there's roughly about $100 per student for that bucket. And then what's left over is into a best practice incentive, which is more geared towards that you're doing certain things, that you're setting, like the dashboard, that you're doing those types of things. Certain goals that you're setting as opposed to actual measures that you have to meet. And so the only misunderstanding at this point is that the $198 million, it doesn't say exactly how much is going to go towards each of those buckets. And so if you do the math, this is what we've been struggling with as I talk to some of my colleagues, is that there's $198 million. If you look at roughly 1.6 million kids in the system, okay, because it's usually per kid, that's only like $120-some per student. So I don't know if that means that they're just assuming that some districts aren't going to get the first level, and so there's up to $100 depending on how many people qualify. But that's something that we're still trying to work through the details now, is how much actual dollars we can potentially get. And at this point, we really don't have a good gauge for that. In addition to that, there's money allocated towards MEPSers, Michigan Public School Retirement, to buy down some of the increase in the rate there. And I believe it's somewhere around $15 per student. Last year we got 100, but this year it's 15. So if you do the math, if you can get all the pieces, potentially up to about $190 per student, assuming we can meet all the criteria and we can get all the funds available. The thing to point out is we got 200 last year. Okay, so we're not getting that money. The 190, if we get that, basically we're about break even from what we got last year. So, you know, not that it's not a bad thing, it's just when you look at.
It's still incremental.
Yeah, it's
Because we
incremental, it's not
budgeted for
really
not having
new,
it.
it's new money because the old money was considered one time. It's just one time in different pockets as opposed to what they were giving us for last
And
year.
it's not
So,
actually an increase.
well, it depends on how many dollars
Technically,
per
yeah.
student that we get
not.
to determine if it's
But
going to increase.
it's
But it's
going
not
to
a
be outside
decrease.
the foundation allowance. The
Correct.
foundation allowance.
The foundation allowance is the same. And so, and I gather
At a lower-
that this is
no.
probably gonna be more of the future, is that any of the money that's given, it's given with strings attached, or there's some type of, you know, rather than just saying it's $100 per student, everybody gets it, they're gonna be having these same,
It's incentives.
yeah, similar type of criteria. So, so that's what we know as of this point. It's only been out a few days, so we're still trying to weed through the
We don't know
details.
So
what the
I've-
incentive is.
Yeah, I've been hearing some language that I wondered if it doesn't explain the math a little bit. And that is, the language is a year's worth of pay for a year's worth of progress. And that's the way it's being described. the incentive for the $100 incentive per. And I wonder if they don't really mean for the percentage of your students in your district who make a year's worth of progress, you get that many $100 increments.
If you read the text of on the governor's website of the legislation that they're proposing, there's this whole calculation. A student who was proficient last year and remains proficient gets X points. A student who was not proficient last year and doesn't change gets 0 points. I mean, and it would easily come up to where
Well,
you're.
it's very complicated, and there are 5 areas. There are significantly improve, maintain, decline, and significantly decline. So there are 5 areas, and there are points assigned to each of those areas. They are looking, for example, at the MEP, and they are looking to see how individual students progress from one year to the next. It's different if a student was proficient and maintained than if a student was not proficient and maintained.
But aren't the
ex-
benchmarks changing too?
Well, that's
Well,
the
the
thing.
cut
So you're
scores.
comparing apples to
No,
oranges.
they've reset the cut scores back 4 years. So they have looked at how you would have done last year had the cut scores this year been applied. So they've reset that to look at.
Okay, so it'll be apples and apples at least.
It will be apples and
Okay.
apples. And
I was wondering about that.
it's a very complicated algebraic formula that will be applied to the scores that our students received in the fall on the MEP, which still have not been released to the public. And so actually, they are going to give us incentive for something that we did already and
You can't
can't
change.
control. It's not like we can say, wow, we need to work hard in this area or that area. That's already taken place, so we can't go back and
Well,
look
the
at
good news
that.
of that is we'll know going into the school year what we
Yes.
what we have in the budget.
Right.
Now, in terms of the MME, that's another whole story, because they can't really, with the MEP, they can actually look at children's growth, a child from one year to the next. With the MME, they cannot do that, because those students haven't had any assessment to find out how they would have done a year ago on that particular assessment and whether or not they have grown. So it may be that they are looking at achievement and not growth on the MME, but I don't know. It's very
But if
interesting.
you read that language, you could see how you would come up with a number that's probably a multiplier against that $100. So that
I
if
mean,
you're
what we've gotten accustomed to is you either hit it or you didn't, and if you did, you got it all, and if you didn't get any of it. And now you're gonna get a portion of it based upon the number of students
that's
who.
what,
That's
and then
what
again,
I think.
Yeah.
in the language of what the governor is proposing, which of course is not
Yeah.
But
anything.
But even with students who are proficient, you could be declining. You understand? You could be proficient in language arts at 5th grade. But if you were a 1 high, because there are areas
of
within
proficiency.
each
Right.
area. If you were a 1 high, and now you are a 1 medium, you have declined. Even though you are advanced proficient, you have declined. So this formula is taking all of that into account.
And perhaps the thing to remember is it's just been proposed. It hasn't been through the meat grinder of the legislature yet, so
Right.
something that,
But you've
what
got
comes out may be something different.
a very nice quantitative model now that can be tweaked, if you will, and refined, but it can be used in assessing things unemotionally. So it's more quantitative than qualitative. I like that approach. I think that's a great first step.
It's still one day, one little picture in time. And I know the Michigan Department of Ed is encouraging the Governor's Council. You know, there's this council that's going to take a look at how to evaluate. I know the Michigan Department of Ed is encouraging the Governor's Council not to do one measure, but to have more of a toolbox of measures, both local and state data. So it'll be interesting what ends up happening.
process.
It's
But all that data, you know, and I was telling Tobias, there was a great article in the New York Times on Sunday talking about this new emergence of all the data all over that is being collected that really is not being sufficiently used.
There's no question.
And that, you know, this is kind of the new era of industry driven is for young people to go into areas with organizing and working with all this data, so you're actually using your data that you spend all this time collecting.
I think we've heard some really good stories over the last few months of how we've been using
Right.
the
Yeah.
data.
We've been doing that for some time.
Right, right, but it may not be.
But a lot haven't been.
Yeah.
Well, my problem is that a large number of the school districts that have not been performing well have almost insurmountable problems, that this kind of a formula is not going to affect them anything but negatively. The districts like the Haslets of this world are going to do fine.
We hope.
We are. One way or the other, we'll do fine. We have a community that's very involved. We have kids coming from great homes. We have a structure, an infrastructure that is very good. But my concern as a citizen is that we have areas that need so much more than that. And I would just feel so much better if there was a formula that gave money to schools that were trying to do things to improve their students' situations and their learning ability. And
They'll incorporate it.
well, so far, I've not seen anything that even goes there. Everything is money connected to your student doing better this year than they did last year, and nothing to how you're getting there and how we're going to sink money into getting there, into areas where they don't have those resources.
I could be wrong, but Steve had mentioned that the first component was one set of criteria. The second component, if we go back to what we did a few years ago, you had to achieve certain levels of success by implementing certain programs in order to qualify for the second sort of funding, if you will. So that could easily be incorporated into this formula that they're putting together, where you are going to have more of a qualitative component to it. That would say, look, the effort's being made, we see that the progress is being made, and of course, you're not going to compare an inner-city school to what we can do in a district such as Haslett. So there has to be some sort of a balancing component or some sort of a weighting to certain aspects of the formula.
Well, it is called weighted performance level change. You'll see PLC, which stands for performance level change, and they are going to weight that. So essentially, you're competing with yourself. You aren't competing against anyone else. You're competing with how you did one year compared to how you did the next. So in that respect, if you are a lower achieving school, you're competing with how you did last year and trying
Right.
to improve.
Right.
So
That
it's not
makes
like
sense.
you're out there not achieving very well and have to compete against the Haslets of the world.
That's intuitive.
So,
Right, well, that still
In that
doesn't
respect-
change my point, though.
no, I don't disagree.
The other two major components that weren't mentioned, one is the retirement rate. That's a really big issue for us. This year, we're paying 24.5%, and next year it's going up to over 27%, which about $170 per student more for retirement costs. Then in the following year, they're looking at over 31% for the rate, which it's just really unconscionable as far as how high that rate is. That's not including any other benefit costs like health insurance or any of that. You add in those components, almost all of our employer groups are well over 50% in the cost of benefits when you look at salary dollars versus benefits. And that's really the number it's really hard to control. I mean, even with the additional money, which is a great thing, it's that retirement piece that's really, it's just gone up so high, it's been very difficult. It's over $300,000 for us, just for that change, and then another $300,000 for next year, and we just added $300,000 to this year's budget. So you look at almost $1 million collectively over that 3-year period. So,
And you can't go out and get private.
and there's nothing you can do. We just basically are
to-
told
To buy out contracts and set up
Correct.
annuities and.
what we're paying. And then the last component is all-day kindergarten, which we've talked about
Yeah.
a lot. That is currently in the law, which it was in the law in the 2-year bill last year. But that's another significant financial impact on us if in fact we have to go to all-day kindergarten, because essentially we're gonna have to add staff with no additional revenue as a part of that. And so,
We're gonna do a presentation on all-day kindergarten at our next board meeting.
Yeah.
So,
Because as of now, isn't that a change that, last year we had a little wiggle room around it, but isn't now that all-day kindergarten is
The
either
language
you
has
do it or
been
you
there. The language has been there.
lose
It
the
was,
money.
the deadline of when it was going to go into effect was pushed
Effect.
to this coming school year.
Yeah, that was started by Granholm.
Yep, that was a great one.
Another nice gift.
so those are really the three areas that are really gonna have the biggest pressure on budget, so.
So the headlines in the paper looked good, but the fact is, it's still a pretty big
And not receive the
cut
funding.
So is the rest of the
deficit
story.
or reduction for us, we gotta look
that was
at.
in the details.
Sure.
One of the other things that's in the budget I saw was some money towards early childhood that I think hasn't been there in a long time. I'm not sure exactly what it goes to, I'm not sure how it might impact us, but I think it's intended to have kids better prepared by the time they get to kindergarten.
I don't know, it could be part of the Great Start Readiness Program, which is already there, and it could be that they're going to increase that so more at-risk 4-year-olds can attend preschool, and I would suggest to you that's where the money should go. That's where we'll get more bang for our buck, is if more 4-year-olds are in school. I think that will do more for young children than all-day kindergarten, quite frankly. But that may be going to Great Start Readiness, I don't know.
I've been quoting you on that.
Yeah.
And I think when we have our community conversation, I hope you're gonna be there to say that.
I've been saying that for a lot of
Yes.
years. I'm not making much. The legislature isn't listening. They're not listening to me.
Well, we're agreeing with you, so. Well, didn't we have a presentation quite a few years ago about how New Zealand became one of the most literate societies in the world by having a national advertising campaign to read 100 books to your child before they started kindergarten? 1,000,
books.
okay. And it did. It had a significant impact on their population and on the literacy rate. And you're not talking about a country that doesn't have huge pockets of people that don't have a lot going for them. They have a very large native population that was very poor, and it made a huge difference, and they really became the #1 literate society in the world.
97% literate.
Yeah.
Something, really high.
So there's simple things that can be done.
Sure.
For a lot of years, the last 20 years, they've been
Yeah,
that kind of
Read
literacy rate.
1,000 books?
to your
1,000.
child
To your
before
child.
they
Before they.
hit kindergarten.
Not
and
the
in-
same book 1,000 times?
No, no.
That good night moon every night for their whole life.
We've all been there.
Really,
so-
if you read a book every day for 3 years, so from the time they're 2 until they're 5, you hit 1,000 or thereabout. The other interesting thing in New Zealand, because I did visit schools there years and years ago, is that all students start school when they're 5 years old on their birthday. So it's a unique system where when you turn 5, you go to school.
So it's like a
And
rolling
It's a
in.
rolling enrollment, and it's ungraded, pretty much in K-1, 2, it's ungraded, so you have 5, 6, and 7-year-olds learning together. But it's a fascinating educational system.
I remember obviously the presentation, I thought
It
was
is,
really good,
Get
so.
started now if you haven't
Yeah.
made it.
Well, I'm sure we'll be talking about and hearing more about the budget in lots of different ways over the next,
As it develops.
as it develops, right, so.
I
Thank you,
just,
Steve.
I mean, the other thing I'd like to say about all-day kindergarten is I do believe it can be made exciting. And I do believe that we can do some very interesting things with an all-day kindergarten program that won't be necessarily typical. And so if in fact that's what we need to do, we will take a look at being able to implement an RTI model, making certain our at-risk students that are 5 continue to get the instruction they need so they can read. So I think it'll be an interesting project.
I just think it's important for the public to understand that although our money comes to us on a per-child basis, that's not how we spend it. It just happens to be an easy way to allocate funds. It has nothing whatsoever to do with how much money we actually spend per child.
Because isn't it true, Mr. Cook, it costs more to educate a 12th grader than it does a kindergartner?
Absolutely. Mhm. Actually, the early L grades are the least costly.
High school expenses.
It's all Bart's fault.
Efficiency study.
That lasted 5 minutes. You're done.
What have you done for us lately?
Your 15 minutes of fame.
Other than spend money, right?
Yeah,
Anything else on that? Okay, thanks again, Steve and Sharon.
good question, Tobias.
All right, action items, we have one this evening. The approval of the minutes from the January 23rd, 2012 regular meeting. Anybody need it pulled?
It is tempting.
No.
Either way, we're voting on it by itself.
All right, I need to,
Support.
all right, all in favor of approving the minutes of the January 23rd, 2012 meeting, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries, the minutes are approved. Announcements, as we kind of referenced earlier, the Policy and Personnel Committee is scheduled to meet on February 21, 2012 at noon. The Finance Facilities Committee is scheduled to meet on February 23rd at 8 a.m. And our next board meeting is on February 27th at 7 p.m. here in this room.
And I will be unable to attend that meeting.
Okay, we will miss you. Thanks for letting us know. All right, any motions regarding adjournment?
I would so move for adjournment.
Support.
All right, all in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Motion carries, we're adjourned.
I want to ask you something before we scoot out, okay?
Just try to get itself up to speed before we start sharing with staff as to where we are. Questions, comments?
Timeline?
Timeline?
Any timeline on that? Stan?
For a decision on advisee,
Right.
I'd put it along with the creep timeline. Because I think if you're gonna make some changes in the schedule, obviously, if you're gonna budget some time for advisee, that'd be an interesting time to do it. And if creep chooses not to change, or not to recommend a change, I would think, still it'd be a good time to do it when the new building was ready to go. So I guess I'd say fall of, help me here,
98.
98. So that would be my guess.
The parent involvement, you say that's been in place for a couple of years and it seems to be pretty stable.
Yep, we, and to be honest with you, a lot of teachers don't use a lot of volunteers. I mean, we've become good at doing it ourselves, for lack of a better reason. So I think we're trying to overcome some inertia there not to use the parents. And so I think that, we're working on it. The Mrs. Webster's there. She's more than willing. If you call her and say, I need 10 people to help me do this, she's very good about rounding up those 10 people for you.
I guess I was wondering if there's been any change in the participation when it was a new program and there's a lot of push, a lot of enthusiasm, and now, as you say, it's sort of stable and it seems to be working okay, whether that's caused either some change in the way it works or the enthusiasm or participation level.
I think we just have to recognize that even when we created the committee, the parent involvement in Hazlet was already staggering. The percentage of parents that show up for conferences, the percentage of parents that belong to like athletic, band, choir boosters. I mean, it's not like our parents are sitting home and not already deeply involved in the school. We just wanted some opportunities to try to increase the visibility a little bit more within the high school. Because that tends to, parents tend to disappear the farther into the system we go.
I know, I guess maybe I'm premature, but I'm trying to tie it a little bit to number 2 up there in terms of getting parents involved in some of the problem side as well as some of the volunteering and assisting with more formal issues. And I don't, maybe it's not even appropriate, but from a school improvement goal, or even from a counseling point of view, I guess I'm looking for some feedback on how, or what kinds of programs, whether it's even been investigated yet in terms of getting parents more involved in that side of the issues that come up with discipline and so forth.
It's not something we've looked at.
I'll leave it open up.
The parents are involved in HCC. Is that what you're talking about?
No, it's something entirely different. I need to take care of it offline.
Oh, okay.
Stan, I really didn't know this was kind of one of the North Central goals. I'd kind of forgotten about that, but just from my short, brief tenure at the high school and participating, I'm still trying to sort that experience out. But no, this was a positive experience.
This is where I should say so are the kids, right?
Yeah, the kids are in trouble, but I haven't heard from any parents yet. But anyway, no, I won't finish that thought. But one of the things that really did strike me was that there are a number of kids we're looking for a connection. I mean, to have a one-on-one. I mean, there are certain kids that have it. Some of them are in athletics or whatever event that they can tie into a Mr. Wongerman or a Ross Brower or a coach or something. Or, my daughter can have one with you because she's, for some reason, can form those relationships on her own. But there's a lot of kids, and they really do need those relationships. So I really do want to support this kind of work. I think the part will be on both sides. How you're going to develop these. Some of them are going to, teachers will probably go through it very pro forma and just like a checklist kind of thing, and some will actually build relationships. But it's the relational part that a lot of these kids are looking for, particularly as the high school grows in size, where we get more and more kids, and those kind of relationships are harder and harder to form.
You can notice that as you walk through the hallways at lunch and look in a teacher's room, and on any given day, there'll be 4 or 5 kids in, Mr. X's room, or 4 or 5 in Miss Y's room, and that group's, fairly constant from day to day, that they kind of, the teachers made them feel welcome and they kind of come in. So I agree with you, the kids are looking for some connection and support, because as the high school gets bigger, we become a little less personal. This would be an attempt to, like you said, to give them an anchor.
Stan, just to piggyback on that, would it not be true in your opinion, or at least an observation, that if you're looking to make a connection like that, it might be best to be at the student's choice as to who would you like to have your advisor, rather than the other way around? We are assigning you to Miss X or Mr. Y.
But are you going to feel bad when there's 300 kids in Mr. Jones's room and everybody in your room?
Obviously, there's going to have to be some sorting. There's clearly, but at least there's the attempt, rather than saying, because if I get assigned to Mr. Y and I don't know Mr. Y, I've never met Mr. Y, I don't have any classes with Mr. Y, I'm in a situation in which they've told me this is the person I'm supposed to go to if I have any kind of a problem, but I don't know that person.
But incumbent on Mr. Y and that student would be to build that relationship. And what we've talked about is you might marry those people for all 4 years, and we probably would do it probably have 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders together, so that every year you're only adding a quarter of a group to an existing group, so that it's easier to incorporate. So you're not starting over every year. And there's a myriad of possibilities.
My confidence level in that, though, of forming that bond in somebody that you don't, if I'm going through a curriculum of, whatever, it doesn't make any difference, but I avoid sciences or I avoid math at almost all costs, and yet I get assigned to Mr. Y, who's the chairman of the science department. I'm never going to see that person in my curriculum. But yet I've got to go see that person. I guess I'm just curious.
It's entirely possible that a kid that really likes you may never see you. We're big enough now that, and I often say this, I used to be able to walk through the halls of Hazlitt High School and you knew whether it was a Hazlitt kid or not, and you walked through the Meridian Mall and you knew whether it was a Hazlitt kid or not. I can't say that's true anymore.
We're all getting older.
Because, besides the degradation of the memory, it's just the increase in memory.
You don't have to admit that here, but.
You walk through the mall now and you see a group of kids, and it used to be without doubt you could say those are ours or those aren't ours, but now I'm not sure. And that's just we're just looking for a place for connection. Like I said, and the program we have no preconceived notion of what that form should look like.
Right. Okay. My thought.
I've not come across anybody that's done it that way though. Yeah. Where you've just had, I think you incorporate a chance for you to get out of Mr. Y's if that's not a good fit for you.
Well, the first choice, second choice, third choice type thing. So, okay.
Well, on that same line, a few years ago, we had Judson Hickson spoke before school started one year for the staff. And that is one of the things that I remember him describing was a school district that was having had a big dropout problem where the teachers decided to, I don't remember all the details, I'm getting old too, Scott, but I think they decided to have lunch with a group of kids one day a week, and the kids got to pick the teachers, and there were some teachers who had 30, 40 kids that they're sitting at the table with, and there were some teachers who had none. And part of the gist of what he was getting at was pointing out that this not only helped kids who actually wanted to spend time with a particular adult and speak with them, but it also helped some teachers to realize that maybe some of the things they were doing they could learn to do a little differently that may somehow reach children that they wanted to reach a little bit better. So, not to say that would be what I think we should do here in Hazlet, but just to comment on that because it was a similar situation where the kids made the choice.
Something to keep in mind.
The surveys, is this part of your program too? Do we do some surveys to try to see what the reactions are, how well they like or don't like, or what they like or don't like about the advisee programs?
We've got data from the middle school in prime time, and I know prime time has come over and surveyed the kids as they've gone through high school. We've not looked at that data yet, but from our own prime time program in the middle school, we'd have some of that preliminary data. We've not surveyed our people yet.
Okay. I guess I'm thinking that there's a lot potentially to this advising. It's not just your academic curriculum. There are kids who have reasons to want to have an adult connection that have maybe nothing directly to do with what their academic situation is. And do we know that, and how do we manage that as part of the advisor program?
Yeah, we manage that right now with some groups and things, right? I mean, special needs groups, but I don't know how that would be incorporated into the advisee program.
Or even if it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Charlie Atluski is going to talk about our last topic, school climate. Again, this is another topic. This was not the original goal. They have met a couple goals, and now they're on to this one. Charlie?
If you look up at the last one in number 2, it just talks about how we are wanting to develop a means of recognizing achievement of individual students. One of the ways that we try to do that is placing or showing value on both achievement in academic areas and other areas, athletics, outside activities. There's a wide array of different things that we're looking at. In the past, what we would do is we would look at concerns, at least I say the past 2.5 years I've been here, looking at the concerns that were affecting the school. I know the school parking lot concern for a period of time with theft was one. I believe Mr. Johnson passed out the language concern that we had overall at school. We addressed it with the example, you have the top 10 reasons why I swear, kind of a Dave Letterman type thing that each teacher got to post in their classroom. We put it on a nice cardboard. In the past, we've tried to do that, but as opposed to try to reacting to things, we try to be more proactive. And some of the things that we're trying to do is try to come up with long-term goals and foster the academic and the outside areas and go from that approach as opposed to reacting to situations that come along the way. But at the same time, if things come up, we address them as well. Try to use a more practical approach. Questions you have on that?
How successful were your top 10 reasons for?
One of the things that we talked about.
Swearing.
Yeah. Obviously, it's not something that's acquired as they come in as freshmen. But one of the things that we felt that was not the way to go was a means of punishment. We talked to, we had several people on our committee and other teachers talk to the students about, well, how do we address that? And they said, well, what are you going to do? You're going to punish by giving Saturdays, or you're going to punish it this way? And they said that won't do really anything. And we thought, well, in some ways that's true. So what we thought we'd do is try to make them aware of what is right and what is wrong language to use in school. And so the top 10 reasons were maybe a way to attract attention that way. We were still looking at an artist to do something like this on a nice type of display to put in the cafeteria, something that's more visible besides just classrooms. So we're trying to use that approach in terms of being more actively discussing what we can do as opposed to what the punishment may be. But it takes the staff, it takes everybody involved walking through the halls to help try to enforce that. And what is a term that needs to be brought down to the office, what is not, can be sometimes very different between teachers. So that's kind of a difficult one to tackle.
Does the top 10 reasons change?
From?
Is there like an update?
Yes, yeah, like an update, yes. Yeah, that's our first one that we've come up with. And actually, I remember Bill Rumsey's class actually helped, kids actually were involved with some of it.
That seems appropriate, yes.
We thought we should involve them. Yes.
Did you say we have seen some improvement in some of the issues with the parking lot?
I think we have. I'm not involved on a daily basis, but.
Yes, we have. I think one of the things that's happened, though, that stopped some of the damage and that was happening out there, was that they caught some students who were going through 3 or 4 different schools' parking lots and breaking into cars for stereos and so forth. Okay. And that put a stop to the breakage. We haven't had that much damage this past year to students' cars, although we did have a car stolen Thursday on the lot. It was recovered.
The stereo, they don't car.
Wasn't damaged, was it? Yes, it was. I think basically the students are very protective of their automobiles in the parking lot and really do work together. And I think once they found out that it wasn't a group of their own or somebody setting somebody else up, that it was somebody else coming in. And they tell us, hey, there's somebody out in the parking lot that we don't know. And Tom King and I will go out and try to find her, or Tom goes out quite often lunchtime. And somebody may be sitting in the car, they shouldn't be, so we made it a priority. And I think damage, plus we always have the police reports that some kind of damage, police come in, and they're visible in the school.
This related all to the closed campus thing that seemed to be popular in the long haul?
Damage to cars?
No, just being out and about. I mean, if we have a closed campus, would there be a great need for people to be out in the parking lot?
Really no need for students to be out in the parking lot. That's what we tell them. We get them that we don't need to be here. And there are some consequences. We discuss with the students who go out there. That's why we go out there and do that.
Right.
One thing that we talk about too is just a reminder of kids not to leave their vehicles after school for a long period of time. Well, that's happened in the past where they've left them sometimes overnight. There's a problem. So, and sometimes we expect cases, not just local kids trying to get in, but actual people coming in drilling through the keys, and some of the dudes that seem to do that for a living.
I had a question on going back to the discussion of the language. What kind of discussion has there been with the entire staff about trying to nip the language?
Well, we seem to be split.
Is that something your committee is involved in?
What we did is we actually did a skit last spring, I think it was last spring, where we had a couple of teachers just make a couple of comments, and we rehearsed this, and then we kind of came up with some different language, right, in the staff, in our staff meeting. And that kind of grabbed everybody's attention real quick. And so we talked about that kind of to try to bring awareness to the staff. But there's obviously different ideas on how to enforce it, what is unappropriate. Each teacher seems to have some different ideas on things. And so we're still trying to come up with a policy. And I don't know if we need to go through kind of a list of these are the do's and these are the don'ts, but we need to come to some type of consensus what is appropriate, what's not, and then how to deal with that. Every time we catch the kids swearing, we just send out to Mr. King or Mr. Johnson. I don't think that's a solution. But
Yeah, is that something that you're pursuing though?
We're looking at it, yeah. And we're just, as a committee, we're still fairly divided on how we should approach that. We agree with that making students aware is, we think is a better approach, but there has to be, at some point, you know, obviously we can send the students down to the office, but it's a problem. And I think it's not just, obviously it's worldwide.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Again, just another comment from the brief experiences on, I think this is another major challenge, just like the one before it. I mean, this was clearly stood out in class. I was really surprised on two fronts on part of this. I quickly learned why principals don't have any hair when I visited the school. I mean, Gunnar was supposed to team teach this class with me, and he never showed up because he always had problems. But on the other hand, I was impressed with the students. I thought, you know, when they get to college, there's a lot of segments of the students that never appear in my classroom because they just don't go to college. So I had to deal with a broader spectrum of kids than I've ever dealt with before, and it was a challenge. And at the same time, I'm fortunate we're in Hazlet. These are mostly, on the whole, really good kids. They have some need for some civility and understanding manners and things like that, just like everyone. But I was impressed on that side. But with this issue of achievement, they all of them can't articulate this very well, but they're all searching to be recognized for who they are and some sense of fairness. And in a kind of, we were wrapping up the class just before Christmas, my part of the class just before Christmas, and we were doing some things, and so Jim Bradley set up a little panel, some kids as administrators and some kids as students, and they were talking about what concerned them the most, and it really came down, and soon the administrative side was supporting the student side, so you had no two sides, but the idea that all kids should be treated the same, and that athletes and people in special situations like choir, all pals get treated different than everybody else, and these kids weren't, and they really made a statement, as well as they're learning to articulate for themselves, that we want to be accepted by teachers for who we are and recognize that some of our achievements that don't get into grades, and this is a big issue for them, a lot of them. And they have a very hard time articulating because they've never been asked to articulate it, I don't think. But I think it's an issue that if you can get a handle around, would really help the climate in the school.
One of the things we talked about too, and we need to get more input, is last year, Mr. Johnson, they had these along the library wall, you see that big long bulletin board, and that's an area where kids can put up different achievement events or something, and that's a great way of displaying. We just need some people in charge of putting things up and doing those kinds of things and actually getting them in. I think that's one way of displaying it. But you're right, there's a lot of things that we don't know, in terms of what kids are doing in terms of achievement. I think we learn a lot, but there's always things up there that we don't. And, but you know, a lot of times we don't know.
Who else? Any more, Dan?
That concludes our presentation for the evening.
Very good.
Any general additional questions?
I just had one general comment. Remembering from when you were here at the board before on this and in this presentation now, I just want to compliment all the people that have been involved in this, because you started really with a blank slate, clean slate, which sounds real good, except that when you look at it and you realize you don't have anything to follow, you have to start somewhere and you have to create new things. And I think all of you in the different areas have done a really good job, and I'm very impressed with what you're trying to do. Thank you.
The process has taken a little longer than what it normally would, because we had some changes in our visiting teams, we had to make some substitutions. Although North Central is only supposed to occur every 5 to 7 years, I've been through about 35 years worth, because as I changed schools, we had one come along and said, geez, it's only every 7 years, but I've done like a lot of them. Interestingly enough, I used to always write down, it was much different, it was a checklist and what you personally thought your strength and weakness was. I used to put down, me was my strength. I noticed how it changed. When I first started, I was my age was strength because I was young and excited and etc. But I kept saying my age, and I would say at the end, or not even the last one, it's because I'm more mature and I have more experience. So it was like maybe the same reason every time. You can't do that with this kind of system. It is much more difficult. We have been accredited by NCAA since 1964, so it is a long tradition that has it. We want to keep that. This is certainly the longest and the hardest one for us to achieve.
I just have one comment that I'd like. I just appreciate all the thoughtfulness that's gone into all that you've presented and the things that you guys are all working on. and your obvious willingness to change and grow and learn new things. I think it's just great. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you very much.
And I guess, Kathy, I'd like to say the same thing to the school staff. I think you may not have heard from them the last 4 or 5 years, but they're just very active, especially in the building. And I'm very proud of what they're doing, what they've done, how they deal with students. They're just an excellent faculty, and they really care about the kids. But these 5 committees have worked long hours, have endured changes, from having to change their goal, having different chairpersons come in and take over. It's kind of an elongated process, but they've done a wonderful job, and I've been very pleased. And we've got a long ways to go yet, but we're a lot closer, and we should be, some of the committees hopefully will be done with this year or shortly after. We've learned some things. We've learned to narrow our focus and our goals and not make them so broad. And we learned, like the people have said who have been up here, Gail and Dan and some of their staff members, talked about we need more diversity on the committees. Instead of math and science, we need everybody. So there's a well-represented group on each one of our committees next time. But again, I'm very proud of what they've done, what they're accomplishing, and where we're going. And we're doing a lot of things. And again, there's a few of them. You haven't heard about them, but they've been there, and we want to let you know, from North Central to Crete to school improvement, there's a lot of activity. And as you heard from Seema's report tonight, there are a lot of students who are actively involved in what's going on at high school, from PALS to National Honor Society to Key Club, Student Council. It's a great place for kids to be and teachers to work.
Thank you all for coming. A very good presentation, very informative, a lot of information that I don't think that all of us were aware of in the past. Again, thank you. As Gunnar said, quite often these things go on without us being aware, and it's refreshing to have these kind of presentations. So thank you all again for coming tonight. Our next item, special education issues. Mr. Boardman.
Good evening. First, I would like to talk about the special education waivers. I know you all received the packet of waivers in your board packets. Recognizing that Michigan special education rules were out of sync with the way most school districts are operating their programs, the State Board of Education approved a process in June of '96 for local or intermediate school districts to request waivers from the special education rules. These waivers allow the requesting districts to operate their programs under alterations from the current special education rules and regulations for a period of up to 3 years. The county is asking that the waivers that you have in your packet will be granted for the maximum 3-year period. If approved, the waivers before you would be retroactive to the beginning of the school year. So even though we're into the end of January now, we are still going to submit them this year, and it will go back retroactive to the beginning of the 1996-97 school year. Since September, there have been many planning sessions involving local directors and intermediate administrators to go over and review the rules and regulations and look at what should be written in these waiver requests. And the 4 waivers that are in your packet were the ones that there was consensus among all the school districts in Ingham County to submit as a joint waiver. I'm going to briefly review each waiver for the people in the audience. And the first one is experience requirement for the resource room teachers. It's very hard to find special education resource room teachers nowadays. There seems to be more postings than there are people available to fill those positions. One of the requirements, the current requirement, is to have a 2-year basic classroom special education teaching experience. This waiver is requesting a the elimination of that 2-year experience, and that would allow local districts to hire special ed resource room teachers directly out of college, which would be advantageous for filling some of the vacant positions. The second waiver request, joint waiver request, is the elimination of psychological or medical evaluation requirements as part of the eligibility determination for certain disabilities. Once a student is identified as special education, part of the law states that for every 36 months they have to have a comprehensive reevaluation to maintain their certification. In looking at some of the disability areas, by the time students go through 3 or 4 of these reports, there's not a lot of new information gleaned from these evaluations. And so we're looking at eliminating that requirement if a student has previously had 2 comprehensive reevaluations. The disability areas that would be included in this waiver are the severely mentally impaired, trainably mentally impaired, educably mentally impaired, severely multiply impaired, hearing impaired, vision impaired, and physically and otherwise health impaired. Just because we might eliminate or have this waiver to eliminate the psychological evaluation, if there's a critical piece of information that comes up in the interim, we can still have the psychologist do the evaluation of the student. It just allows us the flexibility not to have that person involved or a medical person. The third joint waiver is to allow special education reimbursement for non-professional staff employed in the special education for less than 100% of their time. Currently, all non-professional staff, such as paraprofessionals and secretaries, their employment has to be 100% special ed, or we don't receive any reimbursement on their positions. So if we have a healthcare aide at Wilkshire, for example, that's also a playground aide, we can't claim her portion of her special ed portion of her salary for reimbursement. This would eliminate that requirement and allow us to do split funding on non-professional personnel. The last request, joint request, is a timeline from referral to the completion of the IEPC. Under the current law, it states that once initial referral is signed, the school district has 30 school days to complete that evaluation and conduct an IEPC. We are asking in this waiver request to extend that timeline to 45 days. This extension of the timeline is consistent with federal rules and regulations. Michigan happens to be more restrictive in this regards. The guarantee is that the evaluations will be completed within 30 school days. However, it allows us an additional 15 days to schedule the IEPC meeting, and sometimes that's where we run over conflicting parent schedules and professional staff schedules. As part of the waiver process, the State Department requires that each waiver is evaluated as to its impact it may have on the delivery of special education services. Ingham Intermediate School District will take on the evaluation of that each year of the waiver. Ingham ISD has also been working with the Parent Advisory Committee in developing these waiver requests. If any Hazlitt parent would like more information or on these waivers or make comments, I would appreciate it if they would contact me at 339-8205 prior to the January 27th board meeting. That's my presentation on waivers. Are there any questions?
Will these waivers be accepted automatically, or do you know the outcome of them already? Or
That's an interesting question you asked there, Kathy. Initially, Wayne Intermediate School District submitted a variety of waivers in August, I believe, and they were all denied by the State Board of Education.
So
since then, the political venue has changed a bit, and several intermediate school districts have already had waiver requests approved. So right now, I think there's probably a very good chance, 90% chance, that they will be approved.
How soon do you know that?
Well, the intermediate's looking for submitting them in mid-February, and the timeline for approval is 30 days from the date the State Department of Education receives those.
the Ingham Intermediate administers all of the waivers, is that what you're saying? But each
Well,
district votes on it?
no, they're submitting them as a joint waiver. You have two options. One's a joint waiver where the whole county or intermediate school district goes in. The other one is individual waiver per school district.
Okay.
And these are.
Now, so each of the school districts in the county, their boards individually vote on this?
Actually, it doesn't require board action. It
it
only
doesn't?
requires the board president's signature and the superintendent's signature.
Okay, so I guess my point is that if there are districts who do not want to participate in the waiver, does the consequence of the waiver approval apply to them, or they just stay with the rules as they are?
They would just stay with the rules as they are. It's
And we
their
don't,
choice.
it's not a matter of a certain volume or percentage of the school districts participating doesn't influence the approval?
Right.
Okay.
Right. And like I said, in our meeting, there was consensus, at least at our last meeting, that all districts would participate in these 4 joint waivers.
Scott?
Gary, I get the impression that this is just the start of the process as far as the changing in the special ed is, and maybe I'm getting the wrong impression, but this is the first 4 application for waivers. Do I sense that there's going to be more here in the upcoming future because of the climate in the school community in the state?
I don't know if there will be more waivers. I think there will be a dramatic change. In fact, Rich Baldwin at a meeting I went to last month indicated that there will be dramatic changes in the special education rules and regulations within the next 3 years. I think this is kind of an interim.
Will that generate more waivers as a result of the changes that are, it seems like it's loosening up. It seems like it's trying to be streamlined more. I mean, am I reading that the way you're reading it, or am I seeing something that isn't there?
Yeah, no, I think so. It's trying to come in sync with the way school districts operate. When these rules and regulations, for the most part, were written, it was before inclusion, before co-teaching, those kind of things. There was a lot of basic classrooms. Most school districts have moved away from that. And so there's a conflict between the way the rules are written and the way school districts are operating.
And the way they're reimbursed.
And the way they're reimbursed, right.
So it seems like to me that a lot of, or some of this seems to be in a streamlining in that of trying to get the way things are done compared to the way things are reimbursed and trying to get them on the same track.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Is that what it's, that's why I'm asking, this is the 4 that all of the districts in the ISD are in agreement with, but I sense that perhaps there may be some more that maybe they're not all in agreement with, but yet are still on the plate.
Well, yeah, you could write a waiver for any rule or regulation. These are the 4 that we felt would help us operate our programs and not negatively impact students or the delivery of services.
Streamline.
Right.
Okay, but you don't see coming back next year?
No.
For 4 more, or 3 more, or whatever. This is it for the 3-year period?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think there will be a change in 3 years. I don't know what that change will be. Dr. Baldwin didn't know either, but, you know, there's been a lot of articles in the newspaper about just adopting the federal rules and regulations and a variety of things. And of course, the task force that was commissioned by the state 4 years ago, they're still looking at their recommendations.
Okay.
So you would perhaps think that within the next couple, 3 years, in the rewriting of the rules, that we wouldn't have a need for the waivers because they would accommodate what our operating needs are.
Hopefully
That's the intent.
Yeah, hopefully that will be the results. That's what I'm looking forward to, yes.
Although, the way I understand it now, we're still not, that we're certainly not guaranteed full reimbursement for special education services, right? So,
No.
for example, if we can count partial, whatever, it doesn't matter. I mean, the pie isn't really gonna get any bigger. We can just apply for maybe a half a person where before we didn't apply at all.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that we're gonna get the money for it, right?
No, it'll increase our state reimbursement a little bit. Because we have 2 systems of reimbursement, the intermediate school district reimbursement and then the state reimbursement. And the split funding issue is strictly a state reimbursement issue. It's not, has nothing to do with Ingham.
Yeah, but if the pie's only so big.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
But
true.
this,
How are you gonna
does,
get
what,
more
are you
money
saying that
if-
the state fully fully reimburses?
No, they're
See, I didn't
reimbursing
think
at
they did
6
either,
cents on the
so,
dollar.
okay.
Right, right.
All right, so-
It's not a great deal of money.
So the word fully doesn't need to be in this.
Yeah, right.
This is
Strange
what the
file.
grant case is all about, is reimbursement for mandated,
Right.
you know.
Right.
Right,
Right.
into the
That's
head.
what that's all
yes.
about.
I just don't think we should spend the money yet, guys.
No, I wouldn't. Might pay your
Think that
salaries
we've got some extra money in there, because.
for the year.
Sounds like we can cover that.
Yeah.
Boy, that would not cover much.
You know, under the governor's executive order that he issued in December, these waivers would be approved only by the superintendent and not the State Board of Education as they currently are. I mean, that would be taken away from the state board, so, and basically go behind closed doors.
Yeah.
So,
And that's,
Political, would it?
yeah, absolutely.
initially,
So-
when Wayne, I mentioned Wayne earlier, was denied their waivers, that was by the state board.
Yeah.
When the waivers came back, Dr. Ellis had done that.
Was that before the election or after the election?
It was after the election.
Safer.
Safer, that's right.
Again, Jerry, if I could just emphasize that Mr. Nelson and I, when we talked about putting the agenda together, you had stated that to approve the waivers only called for the board president and superintendent to sign the document. But we both, along with you, felt that this was an opportunity not only for an airing among the whole board, but also with the community too. So again, to echo what you've already said, if there's any parents who have concerns about this, between now and the next couple of weeks, they should contact you or board members and let us know of your concerns so that we can consider those before we take action at our next meeting to actually approve the waiver documents.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if there's a technical approval,
Oh,
but I wouldn't
but it
sign
will
unless
appear
the
as-
board is going to be in consensus with
I
it,
see.
of course.
So we will be voted
At our next
Oh,
meeting,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that?
Just one question, Jerry, on this one dealing with the evaluations. Have you talked to any of the Hazlet folks who have children with these handicaps, as to what they think?
I have not directly, no. Like I say, Ingham Intermediate has been working with the PAC, and Lori Olemacher is our PAC representative. And they've been going through that committee process and developing of these waivers, but I personally have not. I could do that. I have no problem doing that.
Well, I know you're asking publicly for
Sure.
comment, and I guess I would, encourage people to call you if they do have any questions, because it's important.
Yeah, it is.
And we don't want to subtract from the services that,
Right.
if the children need it, then they need it.
Right. Okay. I'd just like to make two other brief comments. There's a couple other agenda items here on special education. One is the increase of the special education resource teacher position. Murphy School has had a lot of move-ins in the last month and a half, and several of these students have come in from other districts already identified needing services, and consequently, the caseloads have grown dramatically there, and we're out of compliance with those. And we do have a half-time resource room teacher there, and, looking at increasing her full-time to meet the compliance issues with rules and regulations. And then in, the other position is hiring of a half-time speech therapist. I believe that's on the action, part of the agenda tonight. In November, we came to you requesting, because of caseload sizes again, early on, and we did, Gunnar Johnson and Valdi Galitas and Sue Krein and myself did interview Melissa Gordon, and she has very good recommendations from Leslie School. I feel very fortunate. Speech therapists are also extremely hard to find these days. That this individual lives in Hazlet and would like to work in Hazlet, and comes highly recommended. Okay.
Questions on either of those two? Okay, thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry.
The fourth discussion item, Meridian High School Grant Awards. Maria?
Thank you. I have
two pieces of good news tonight for two separate grants that we've recently received within the last month. And I'd just like to briefly give you an update on what those are and what it will allow us, what services and programs it'll allow us to expand or add at Meridian High School. The first one, as you recall, last fall, October, I came to you with a grant that we had received from the School to Work, the Jobs Commission grant that allowed us to hire a career advisor, which we have since done with Mary Lawrence coming to us, who had previously worked at Lansing Community College. She's on board now, and we're doing some new neat things in the area of career exploration. There was a supplementary grant that became available for folks to apply for who already had a grant. So we wrote a grant for that, and it was funded in the amount of $20,000, which we requested to set up a chemistry class at Meridian High School. We have never offered chemistry before. It became increasingly an awareness for us that our student body was needing some more of these intensive science classes, particularly in the areas that proficiency test requires. Whatever, we've had physics and we've had biology on board for quite some time. Obviously, this is somewhat of an expensive endeavor because you need a whole new line of supplies, materials, and equipment and things. We had known that our building addition with the two new classrooms, one of them would be able to house science, but that's a bit down the road for us yet, and we felt the need for that. So this grant will allow us to add that with the supplies, materials, and things we need. It'll also provide for some staff time for training. We would obviously like to make this chemistry class more focused, as are our other classes, toward the tech prep or applied academics area, so it'll be very hands-on and line up with the rest of our curriculum. So that one we're already eagerly planning at this time. The other one is the Section 353 grant, which we had one previous year, rewrote the grant, and this year got funded actually for an increased amount of which is $63,000. That one will allow us to continue the position of workplace supervisor that we had, which oversees job shadowing, which we provide opportunities for all of our students in our school. Will allow us to increase our business connections. We do a lot already of job placement, actually assisting students with finding jobs, both temporary ones while they're in school and of course ones that hopefully are a little more permanent when they leave school. Probably half of our students right now are headed toward college, but we also think that the School to Work is valuable even for those students, because there will be a job somewhere even after college. So we focus on those things, and our workplace supervisor lays some groundwork for that. We also will continue our workplace readiness testing, which is not only academic related, but it's problem solving, teamwork, listening skills, those sorts of things that employers have sent us messages that students need additional preparation in. So we focus on assessment, readiness assessment in those areas, giving students feedback on where their strengths are in a lot of areas that they probably need a little more practice in. One of the other new things that this grant will allow us to do that we're having one of our staff members, Joanne Jamrog, trained in right now is job profiling. It's something that's quite new to Michigan. A lot of other states do it, but we're having her trained so that we'll do job profiling in the greater Lansing area, which will assist us in having available information for this area as to what's available, what training's required, what positions are open or will be open, and the employer expectations for filling those, the types of training required, this type of information. This is done through ACT Work Keys, and will eventually, I think the only other one in the area that is doing any work in this is Lansing Community College, and we're going to be coordinating with them. We'll probably be the only secondary school for a little bit at least that's doing this. And we'll be coordinating with some area employers, and the potential is there for us even to do some testing for them. We've talked to Myers a bit about doing some of their testing, because we'll have this job profiling will authorize Joanne to do testing that will facilitate, hopefully for our students, some employment possibilities in those areas. So it's kind of new and exciting to us, more in the promotion of our program as a true school to work. One of the goals, as you know, that we have is to let the community know too what school to work really means, because sometimes they associate it just with a vocational training, and we know that it's a much broader, comprehensive preparation for students. One of the things that we do and related to that, I have the only copy right here now, but it'll hit the presses, or it will hit the post office tomorrow, so you should be getting our newest and latest, which promotes us as a model school to work school and highlighting the opportunities that are available there, which is just a little bit of a different approach. Same curriculum, same academic, but just a different approach. So we're pleased with that, and do you have any questions?
Jeff? These are one-year grants?
Both of these are one-year grants, yes.
What might be the impact? I mean, they're not guaranteed, or do you have to reapply for the next year?
Yes, as the 353 one, which the second one I mentioned for 63,000, I applied for last year, and we got a little over 50 we actually got an increase in that one. There was no guarantee. I reapplied for it this year, obviously got it again, so we now have it for a second year, a little different approach, a little different venue that we'll be using it for. But they are 1 year at a time, and if they don't renew, they don't come back. The school to work, we now have two components of that one. One is the career advisor role, the new one that we just got, the 20,000 related to the chemistry and teaching the applied academics. Once we have the course in place, it's a matter of fitting it in with any other curricula. What this will enable us to do is to plan, get a teacher trained, and buy the materials and supplies.
More curriculum development then?
Yeah, exactly, on that one. So that one, the ongoing nature, even if we wrote it next year, it would probably not be for chemistry again, it would be for some other area. And then the 353 special demonstration projects is the workplace supervisor one. And once again, we're fortunate that this year, the second year, we have it even on an increased role. It provides a lot of services for it, and we'll probably, if it's out there, reapply next year, but no guarantee.
Any connection to Career Center? I mean, is this in conjunction with them at all?
Not in conjunction with them, but we work cooperatively with them in, the 353 grant does not. The 353 comes through the State Department through Adult and Alternative Education. The School to Work grant that we have, the Career Center also, Ingham Intermediate has a grant from School to Work, and we do interface with them quite closely in the programs. We do a lot, we're connected with them right now in promoting their apprenticeships program, which they have a grant for in that area, and we lock into that and coordinate with them very closely on that.
Very good, thank you.
Charlie?
So Maria, how much grant money have you gotten this year?
I think this brings us to about $200,000 this year.
At least.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have an ABE grant out there too.
Well, you and
for
your staff
ESL.
are to be commended once again for,
Thank you.
for your creativity and your hard work to get these grants. It's,
We appreciate it.
the
It allows
the
us to
kids
do some
benefit
good things.
tremendously, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Any other questions?
Well, not only do the kids benefit, but I'm sure our community residents, who we all are taxpayers, should be especially pleased because, sometimes when we think of grant money, it comes from heaven, but really it comes from local school district residents from Hazlet and from Birmingham and Grand Rapids and whatever, and then all that money shipped to Lansing. And then through our efforts, we have to write grants and try to bring some of that tax money back to our local community. And Mary and her staff have been very successful with it. Mary has been a little flippant to say, well, we wrote a grant like it's not a big deal. It is a big deal, and it takes a great deal of work and a lot of effort. These are highly competitive grants, and for Hazlet to be able to compete and earn these grants is really a feather in our cap. So I appreciate you saying that, Charlie, and we do appreciate Mary and her staff and their hard work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The last of the discussion items actually is an add-on. It's the out-of-state field trip request for the high school physics class. I'm not sure there's even a need to have a discussion on this. We've talked about it before and approved it before for a number of years, so unless there's another issue, I think we'll move right on into board reports.
This is the Cedar Point trip, correct?
Yes, it is.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yes, it is. On May the 23rd, Friday. Friday.
One's high school, one's the middle school.
Right, these are two separate ones. We
Right.
will actually have an additional action item, number 8, which will be a second Cedar Point field trip, which is different than the 8th grade field trip under item 6B. Okay. Board reports, Legislative Relations Network report. Charlie?
I had a legislative committee meeting last week at the Michigan Association of School Boards, and we spent probably 3 hours talking about the governor's executive order that he issued at the end of December, which basically takes all the administrative functions of the State Board of Education and transfers them to the state superintendent. We had a gentleman from the governor's office that said, yeah, this had been planned, they've been thinking about this for quite a while. And we had a member of the State Board of Education that came in and has a lot of concerns about what's happening. And what the executive order has done has, it really takes 139 sections of the Michigan, of Michigan law, 78 of them from the revised school code, and literally takes that law and changes the law and gives it to the superintendent to administrate, takes it out of the hands of the State Board of Education. And a lot of questions are being raised about whether or not this is even constitutionally allowed, and the Attorney General has been asked to give an opinion on it. The State Board of Education, at least some members, this does become somewhat of a partisan issue, are contemplating maybe there's a suit that could be filed. And the other alternative is that the legislature might rise up and say, no, Governor, you cannot, you just can't arbitrarily change the law like this and do these kinds of things. Because the State Board of Education is a constitutional item. I mean, it's been, it's part of the Constitution. And to take powers away from them that they've had and give it to the state superintendent, there is some question about whether that's the proper thing to do. Just some of the things, and one of them that the superintendent will be allowed to do if this thing goes through, and I mentioned one of them when we were talking with Jerry, was a waiver of his special education rules. That would go to the hands of the superintendent, so he could sit there in his office and he can say yay or nay, versus being in a public forum that the State Board of Education operates in. Pupil transportation rules, rulemaking for public school academies, teacher certification rules, determining recipients of grants that the state board now rules on would go to the state superintendent, property transfers, development and review of accreditation standards. These are just a lot of the issues that are involved with this in these 139 sections of law that are being transferred. So I think it's due to become effective 1st of June, 1st of July, something like that. So I think you'll probably see some activity and read about it in the newspaper about, you know, what folks are doing and are going to try and do about it. And also, there will be an Attorney General's opinion issued. Yeah, Phil?
Charlie, the executive orders normally have, what, a 30 or 60-day layover in the legislative arena for them to say no, and their failure to say no automatically makes it happen. Is that correct on?
I don't know.
Okay. So it has, that's when he signed it as an executive order, is the end of December?
End of December.
Okay. I believe most executive orders are that way.
in 6 months, something like that.
There's a period of time where the legislature has an option to take action.
Charlie, what would the function of the state board be if that all goes through?
Policy. Like, we are policy makers. You know, in a sense, it makes sense to do it, okay? But when you look at the detail and some of the administrative things that the state board has done that are dealing with, you know, have been made into law that they act upon, then it becomes suspect. But we are a policymaking group. That is our function, and the administration they do
Carries
the
it out.
day-to-day administration of the schools, and they make rules. Although that, there are times when, if we disagree with rules, we can certainly discuss it with our superintendent and our administration. That may not be the case at the state level, I don't know. But at this level, we're able to do those kinds of things.
You're comparing it to our board. I guess what I'm curious about there is that if that's the case where it's a policy making, and does the superintendent doesn't serve at the whim of the board of which they're sitting on? I mean, or is the head of, like
The superintendent is hired by the board.
here?
There too.
There too.
There too.
So the governor's infusion of, I'm gonna pick the guy that's the superintendent of schools.
Well, it's
Is
still a political group that's sitting there at the state board. I mean, it's half Democrat and half Republican.
Understand that,
And
but
the board decides, and the governor has influence as to who the state superintendent will be. We've seen that.
Right, and that hasn't changed.
I don't, no, that has not changed. That has not changed. One other issue, the 1997 Legislative Relations Network meeting, state meeting is going to be March 12th at the Lansing Center. And if you haven't gotten a notice, I'm sure you will, in the mail. Cost is $55. The agenda this year will not include the governor. Keynote speak, it's going to deal a lot with public relations, politics, and how we can talk to our community better, be more
political without being political.
more political without being political.
What's the date again, John? What's the date?
March 12th. March 12th.
Stealth politics.
So, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Finance and facilities,
No report, we haven't met.
policy personnel.
We have not met.
Ooh, I like those two reports. Items from the board. Is there anything any individual would like to report on? Charlie?
I went to the Murphy Most meeting, PTO meeting last week, and they are very busy planning for their carnival. And it's going to be near the end of March, and they're going to try some new things this year. And so just, watch for the announcement.
It's a nice thought. That usually has something outside.
Outside, spring. Well, it's inside, but it's closer to spring than we are right now.
We're gonna hope for some more weather. Jeff?
Well, I haven't attended yet, but I just thought I'd remind folks that the honors choir, this is the statewide honors choir, Hazlet has, I believe, four high school, I think they're freshmen that are participating at that level. And that's next week in Ann Arbor at the Hill Auditorium. These are selected choir members from choirs from across the state. There's 2 levels of competition to get into this, and it's going to be quite an outstanding event. I will be attending that, so I'll let you know. If anybody else is interested, it should be a great time.
Action items. Are there any action items people wish to pull? We do have an 8th item, the out-of-state field trip for the high school physics class to Cedar Point. Any others? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Moved and support. Let me read the action items. Approval of minutes, December the 9th, regular board meeting. Number 2, the 1996-97 budget amendment. Number 3, the federal property assistance program. Number 4, approval to hire half-time speech therapists, which we just heard about a minute ago. Number 5, the acceptance of the state's grants that Mario covered. Number 6 is 2 out-of-state field trips, the 7th grade Chicago trip and the Cedar Point trip. Number 7 is the acceptance of a tuition student, Justin Holden from Cary. And number 8 is the out-of-state field trip request from the high school physics class to Cedar Point. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 7-0. Announcements of future meetings. The next meeting, I believe, yes, go ahead. We will be having a work session on the 27th at 7:30. So we will not be on TV. And for those of you who tried to watch us on Monday night and didn't see us, you weren't on TV anyway. So I hope people can catch us during the week. So the next meeting is the 27th at 7:30, and it will be a work session for the board.
Explain what the work session is.
Yes, that'd be
We had talked about possibly presenting to you the middle school restructuring plan. It's one of the goals that we set as a board earlier in the year, and how can we implement a full teaming concept at the middle school. Middle school have put together a very, very good plan, and we'd like to present it to you in that kind of fashion, so we can have a lot of discussion with it. Certainly, within the next month or two, we will have more of a community presentation on that item. Would we want to begin that meeting at 7 o'clock?
Problems with that?
Okay.
Okay, let's make it 7 o'clock instead. Bob and I have, just for other information, Bob and I have discussed on several occasions the remaining sessions that we have said in the fall that we wanted to have, and we'll be scheduling those over the next several months, probably the second meeting of several of the next months. We'll have work sessions rather than regular board meetings to cover those items, so.
Good strategy.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved. Second. Supported.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all.